My name is Ashley. I'm 34 years old. And 6 weeks ago, at my father's retirement gala, he handed me the perfect reason to disappear from his life forever. Picture it: a five-star hotel ballroom, marble floors, crystal chandeliers, over 150 guests in tailored suits and silk gowns. My father, Robert Whitmore, stood at the podium, microphone in hand, doing what he did best: performing. He introduced his family one by one, like trophies on a shelf. When he reached me, his smile went just slightly wrong, the way it always did when he looked at me. "And this is my daughter Ashley," he said, chuckling softly into the mic. "No degree, no direction, been floating around up north doing Lord knows what. But hey, she showed up tonight, so that counts for something, right?" The room laughed. Not everyone, but enough. Enough that the sound filled every corner of that ballroom and settled into my chest like something cold. I didn't flinch. I didn't look away. I stood up slowly, raised my glass, and said clearly, "Congratulations, Dad. This is the last time you'll ever see me." Then I walked out. The silence behind me was total. But to understand why that moment mattered, I need to take you back 14 years. To the day my future was quietly handed to someone else without my permission: the Whitmore family of Greenwich, Connecticut. Upper class, well-connected, the kind of family whose name opened doors before you even knocked. Robert Whitmore ran a mid-sized freight and logistics company he'd built over 30 years. We had the big house, the private school tuitions, the country club memberships. From the outside, we were the picture of success. My mother passed away when I was 9. What followed was 2 years of grief, my father processed entirely by working. Then came Susan. She arrived with a son, Matthew, 4 years my senior, and within a year, they weren't guests in our home. They were the center of it. I became background noise, not through cruelty exactly, but through consistent, deliberate overlooking. Matthew's achievements were celebrated at dinner. Mine were acknowledged, the way you acknowledge weather. Briefly, and without real interest. He got the new car. I got the apology for not getting one. He was groomed to inherit the company. I was expected to be grateful for the roof over my head. Here's the one thing I will say in Robert's defense. There were moments, rare, unguarded moments, when he almost showed up as a father. Once when I was 16, I won a regional essay competition at school. He read the piece at the kitchen table, quietly, all the way through. When he finished, he looked up and said, "You think clearly, Ashley. That's a gift." That was it. No celebration, no follow-up, just those 7 words. And then he folded the paper and went back to his evening. I held onto them for years, the way you hold on to something small when you have nothing larger to carry. I think he did care. Somewhere underneath all that ambition and control, he just never cared enough to choose me. My mother's mother, Nana Josephine, was the only person who consistently saw me. She called every Sunday without fail. She'd ask about my studies, my goals, my ideas. She'd say, "Ashley, you have something in you that this family doesn't deserve to take credit for." When she passed, she left me something the rest of the family knew nothing about, but I'll get to that. At 20, I was a junior at Northeastern University. Business management, 3.7 GPA, a summer internship lined up in Chicago. Robert called me home one Saturday, said it was a family matter. I remember sitting across from him and Susan in his study, watching him arrange papers on his desk while he spoke, never quite meeting my eyes, explaining that Matthew had been accepted into a prestigious MBA program overseas and the family couldn't fund both. He said it like arithmetic, like I was a variable you could remove without changing the answer. Susan placed her hand on my arm and said, "You'll land on your feet, sweetheart. Girls always do." Something sharp moved through me and then went still. I nodded once, drove back to campus, packed 2 suitcases, and never asked either of them for a single thing again. What I found out years later was that there had been a private education fund my mother set up before she died, enough to cover 4 full years at any university in the country. Robert had quietly drained it to cover Matthew's program. He took the one thing my mother left me, then looked me in the eye and said there was nothing left to give. I moved to a studio apartment in Providence with $1,100 and a willingness to outwork everyone around me. I got a job at a small freight brokerage firm, entry level, long hours, no glamour. But I paid attention to everything. I took every free course I could find online: supply chain logistics, operations management, financial modeling. I treated those late night courses the way other people treat graduate school because for me, they were. 4 years later, I launched my own firm, Colbridge Consulting. Just me, a laptop, and a rented desk in a shared office space. I kept my name completely off everything public. No LinkedIn presence, no press releases, no interviews. All client communications ran through my small team and my legal representative. I knew Robert's world well enough to understand that visibility was a risk. Silence was my strategy. Invisibility, for once, worked entirely in my favor. What nobody in my family knew was that Colbridge Consulting had quietly become the primary operations partner for Whitmore Freight, my father's own company. They'd signed a 5-year contract with us 3 years prior. We handled their routing efficiency, warehouse coordination, carrier negotiations, and cost forecasting. According to their own internal reports, we were saving them roughly 38% in annual operational costs. Robert had praised Colbridge at 2 separate industry dinners, called us the backbone of modern freight consulting. He was praising his own daughter and had absolutely no idea when the invitation to his retirement gala arrived. Gold lettering, formal RSVP card. I almost threw it in the bin. Almost. But something in me had grown tired of almost. I knew the kind of man Robert was. I knew what that evening would look like, and I decided I wanted to be present when I finally closed this chapter on my own terms. So I went. Deep navy gown, Nana Josephine's gold bracelet on my wrist. Everything I wore I had bought myself. That still mattered to me more than any label ever could. Robert did what Robert always did. Performed beautifully for everyone who mattered to him, and revealed himself completely to the one person he never thought to consider. When he reached me in his speech, he smiled that particular smile and made me the punchline. And so I stood up, said what I said, and walked out of his story for the last time. The morning after, my phone filled with messages from relatives I barely recognized. Concern wraps thinly around gossip. Poor Ashley, Robert says she's always been fragile. I read each one and felt nothing except a quiet, settled certainty that I had done exactly the right thing. Then on Tuesday, my legal representative forwarded a message from Whitmore Freight's internal team. They were trying to reach Colbridge Consulting's ownership regarding contract renewal. Someone had spotted my name in connection with the firm. They were fishing. I instructed my team to hold with the standard response and sat down to write 2 documents. The first was the official 30-day termination notice. Clean, professional, citing strategic repositioning. My attorney reviewed every line. The second was a personal letter to Robert. It said, "The consultant firm you called the backbone of your operations is mine. I built it. I own it. For 3 years, the daughter you told 150 people had no future has been a cornerstone of your success. I'm ending this contract not as revenge, but as a boundary. Nana Josephine left me a trust you never knew existed because she understood exactly who you were. Everything I have, I built without you. Don't contact me again, Ashley." I included a copy of Colbridge's incorporation papers, my name, solo owner, printed in black and white. The calls started before noon. Robert, Susan, Matthew. 17 missed calls by 2 in the afternoon, and I let every one of them go. By late afternoon, all 3 were in my lobby. I had them shown to a glass-walled conference room, visible to my team, private enough for honesty. When I walked in, Robert looked older than I had ever seen him. Not angry, just diminished, like something had gone out of him on the drive up. Matthew's jaw was tight. Susan had her hands folded on the table like she was bracing for something she already knew was coming. I took the seat at the head of the table and let the silence settle before I spoke. When Robert said he was sorry, I told him an apology offered because you need something isn't an apology. It's a negotiation. When Matthew's voice rose, accusing me of planning all of this for years, I felt something move through me. Not anger, just exhausted clarity. I told him I had built a company. His stepfather had chosen to depend on it. Those were 2 separate decisions, and only one of them was mine. When they finally stood to leave, Robert stopped in the doorway. He looked back at me, really looked, the way he almost never did. And for just a second I thought he might say something that mattered. Then the moment passed, like it always had. He straightened his jacket and walked out. I went back to my desk and got back to work. 6 months later, Whitmore Freight announced significant workforce reductions. Market conditions, the press release said. Everyone in the industry understood what had actually happened. Matthew's early tenure as CEO was already drawing scrutiny from the board. Robert came out of retirement to manage the fallout. The reputation he'd spent 4 decades carefully constructing was coming apart in rooms he could no longer walk into and charm his way through. I heard about all of it secondhand. I wasn't following it. I was too busy. I started therapy. I hired 4 new people. I moved Colbridge into a larger office with harbor views. I visited Nana Josephine's grave on the first Sunday of every month and told her about my week. It felt less strange each time and more like simply keeping a promise. Here's what I understand now that I couldn't at 20, sitting in Robert's study while he looked past me. Your worth is not something other people calculate and hand to you. It is not a credential, a title, or a seat at someone else's table. It is built quietly, in hours no one witnesses, through choices no one applauds, in a direction only you can see clearly enough to follow. Robert Whitmore did not break me. He just couldn't see far enough ahead to realize what he was letting go. I don't carry hatred for him. Hatred is weight I'd rather not haul. But some mornings when I sit at the head of my own conference table in an office I built from nothing, with Nana Josephine's bracelet on my wrist, I think about those 7 words he said at the kitchen table all those years ago. You think clearly, Ashley. That's a gift. He was right about that. He just never stayed around long enough to see what I did with it.